Welcome to Built, Wired, and Secured, the podcast where we explore how modern buildings are designed, connected, and protected in the real world. I'm Alex Morgan, and in today's episode, we're diving into graceful degradation, designing building systems to fail safely, why it matters, where projects usually go wrong, and what decision makers need to understand before problems show up in production. Joining me today is Michael Harrington, who brings decades of experience running property operations and planning for resilience. Cold open. Picture a Monday morning, 9:10 a.m. A short power dip takes down the building's network switches for 15 seconds. The access control system reboots mid-transaction. The elevator control reports a fault, and the HVAC coordinator loses control over several floors. Tenants call the lobby. Security radios are congested. What should have been a 15-second blip turns into an evacuation because no one knew which systems were essential and how to operate them in a degraded state.
From an operational standpoint, that scenario is shockingly common. What breaks if this goes down? If you haven't prioritized what stays up and how people operate when carts fail, small incidents cascade fast. Tenants feel this immediately, and the clock starts on reputational and financial impact.
Today, we'll define graceful degradation versus brittle failure, look at common triggers, weigh trade-offs for design decisions, and walk through safe testing and governance so degraded modes actually work when you need them. By the end of this episode, you'll have a short checklist to start prioritizing what must stay on, lightweight tests you can run this quarter, and guidance on who should own the decisions. Segment 1. Causes. Michael, start by walking us through the failure modes you see most often that lead to cascading degradation.
Sure. The usual suspects are power disturbances, network or comms interruptions, third-party service outages, and single-point failures that weren't obvious during install. Power blips are especially sneaky. They don't always cause a full outage, but they interrupt devices mid-transaction. Vendor outages or cloud service interruptions can take down management consoles while leaving field devices running, which creates a control plane problem. And then there are design blind spots, things like a single remote I/O rack controlling multiple critical functions without local failover. Those are the places where graceful degradation needs to be designed in.
Can you give a short example of how a vendor outage becomes an operational problem rather than just a technical one?
Absolutely. We had a case where the building's access control vendor pushed an update, and their cloud authentication timed out for a few hours. Badge readers defaulted to a locked state by design, so tenants couldn't badge in. From an operational standpoint, the immediate question becomes, who authorizes manual entry? Do you have temporary badges? And do security and property staff know the fallback? That was fine until it failed, and when it did, there was no pre-agreed fallback, so the lobby turned into a bottleneck.
Segment 2. Trade-offs and design. Let's talk options. What does designing for graceful degradation actually look like in practice?
It starts with prioritization. Decide what must remain operational. Life safety, secure access for emergency services, critical tenant functions, and communications. Next, build tiers of redundancy. Not everything needs full active-active redundancy, but essential systems should have local fallback modes. Then separate control planes where practical. Local control that can operate independently if the cloud or the central network is unavailable. Lastly, make failure modes visible. Designing observable, predictable degraded states is crucial so operators can act quickly.
Trade-offs are often cost and complexity. How do teams choose between adding redundancy versus investing in manual fallbacks or simpler observable behavior?
It's a risk priority decision. For functions where tenant safety or immediate access is impacted, invest in redundancy. For lower risk building services, a clearly documented manual fallback is often the smarter spend. There's also an operational trade-off. More redundancy can increase management overhead and test burden. My rule, protect the essentials with automation and redundancy. For everything else, ensure a reliable, documented manual path. And test it.
Segment 3. Operations and testing. Michael, you've run tabletop exercises and lived through real incidents. How do you test degraded states without disrupting tenants?
Start with tabletop scenarios. Simulate the outage, walk through roles, communications, and steps without touching production systems. Then move to staged, low-impact tests. For example, simulate loss of central visibility by isolating the management console while leaving field devices intact. Always notify tenants and have rollback steps. Practice manual fallbacks during off hours and confirm staff can complete tasks under time pressure. The key is cadence, quarterly tabletop plus targeted staged tests for high-risk systems.
Any real-world wins or lessons where graceful degradation saved operations, or where missing it made things worse?
A win, during a utility substation hiccup, our building's primary BAS lost cloud connectivity, but local controllers defaulted to safe schedules and emergency ventilation kept critical labs stable. Tenants noticed a slight temperature drift, but no work stoppage. That outcome was by design, local control with priority schedules. A loss, another site had a single point where the visitor management and access control shared an appliance. When that appliance failed, elevators went to recall and we had a full floor evacuation until manual override policies were executed, which took longer because the runbook hadn't been practiced.
Key takeaways. Let's make this actionable. Michael, give us a concise, prioritized checklist for teams to act on this quarter.
Checklist. 1. Identify and document your must-stay-on services, life safety, emergency comms, essential tenant access. 2. Map single points of failure and label control plane dependencies. 3. Define local fallback behaviors and make them observable in the UI or dashboards. 4. Assign clear ownership for each degraded mode decision, usually a joint facilities plus IT lead. 5. Run a tabletop within 30 days and schedule a low-impact stage test within the quarter. 6. Keep runbooks simple, one-page quick references with rollback steps.
Who should own these decisions? You said joint facilities and IT. Any guidance on governance or vendor responsibilities?
Ownership sits with the organization that runs building operations day to day, typically facilities, but IT must be a co-owner because of network and cloud dependencies. Make vendors accountable for documenting their failure modes and for providing easily executable manual fallbacks. Put those expectations into RFPs and SOWs in plain language. Describe the degraded states you require and how they'll be observed and tested.
CTA. If you want the checklist Michael mentioned and a sample degraded state playbook you can adapt for your building, visit our site and download the free packet. It includes a one-page prioritization matrix and a tabletop facilitator's guide to run your first exercise this quarter. That wraps up today's episode of Built, Wired, and Secured. We covered how to design for graceful degradation, so essential services stay up and small failures don't turn into crises, and hopefully gave you a clearer way to think about how these decisions play out beyond the initial install. Thanks for spending time with us. Until next time, make sure the systems you're responsible for are built to last, wired with intention, and secured for the real world.
Thanks, Alex. Remember, plan for predictability, document your fallbacks, and test with intent. That's fine until it fails. And when it does, you want graceful degradation, not surprises.